This is Take Flights with Mark Whittle.
Gabby, welcome to the Take Flight podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for doing it. I've been really looking forward to speaking with you. The first time I learned about you was many years ago, actually, when you were on the Tim Ferriss show with Laird and Brian McKenzie.
Oh, yeah.
And that was at a point where I was getting so much from his podcast specifically. And I loved that episode with you three. I thought that was outstanding. And he'd been over to see you guys in Hawaii.
Yeah, and it's funny that podcast happened so easily. He just came out with a little recorder and put it on the table. It was interesting because there was no fuss about it. But I think people really liked it. Tim did a good job. Just was one of the things.
Yeah, and it's like things have changed so much now. Like the kind of expectations are studio and lighting, and it just changes the conversation a bit, doesn't it?
I think, you know what it is you can't be afraid to not sound smart, and you have to, sometimes it doesn't come out good, or it's chunky, or, and I sometimes think when people or situations become more successful and larger, that the urge is to sort of slickify it or make sure it sounds perfect. And I actually feel that sometimes the messiness, for certain people, is actually the feeling that is like why it touches them inside, because it's like you can then you feel the human kind of a knowingness. So it's it's like calibrating. How do you become more professional, more dialed in, without losing the a little bit of the imperfections?
Yeah, but that is so true for everything in life at the minute, isn't it? It's like getting away from the soundbite or the highlight reel, and being real and honest and truthful and vulnerable.
Well, it's hard to do because everybody chimes in and has an opinion. And I think when you're sitting there and you're saying, hey, I'm really being honest with how I'm feeling, and then everyone piles on and tells you how bad your opinion or your feeling is, it's more scary, because in that moment you were being genuine. But I think if we can, just use our own reference, I feel like when we know what our intentions are, and then you just let it fly.
What is your intention at the moment?
My intention has always, it's interesting. I interviewed Jim Quick. He's a guy who teaches people to read and such. And he's a very smart guy with an interesting story. But he said to me, everybody has a question when they're walking around, directed at whatever's happening. It's almost like we have a certain kind of filter that we filter the world in. And he was like, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And he goes, do you know what your question is? And I was like, absolutely, I know what my question is. My question has always been, what's the point? And I have a question right behind it. And it's, what's the right way to respond? I think because of when I was really young, I didn't have a ton of parenting. And for whatever reason, I was always sort of interested in trying to pay attention to doing the right thing. And also you learn, saves you probably a lot of hassle and time later. But what's the point? And so I think my intention is just to have conversations, because I do have certain access, about how can we make it easier for each other. Like, can we exchange information? Doesn't mean we're going to do it the same way. Doesn't mean it's that kind of thing. So when I do my work, it's like stuff I have to really be interested in myself, but there also has to feel like at least it moves towards something that would support somebody. So whether it's in pure fun or entertainment, or whether it's in real information, and it's never hopefully presented in a way that it's like you can be perfect and powerful and because there is room for that and people love that, but I that's just not me.
It has to have a point or like a meaning, basically.
Well, yeah, and I'm always unsure. Like within being sure and moving forward and trying to accomplish and achieve, I always am in touch with that. I feel unsure. And there are people who present differently, who are very robust, and the 10 ways. And when I'm down, I do this. And it's like, I appreciate that. And there's actually other people that respond better to that. Right. And, but that isn't what I'm contributing. I'm contributing, like I want to go for it anyway. And I'm completely unsure, and I'm still going to go for it. And I have no answers, none.
I love that. What do you like? Let the answer appear, or just being open to what's happening?
Yeah, I think you're open to what's happening, and you lead with your questions. You lead with your eyes open and with curiosity, and and it isn't about having confidence to try to achieve or accomplish. It's just having enough confidence to be in pursuit, and all that other stuff works itself out. Like success and things will come if you just are willing to say, "I really want to move in that direction." And ooh, sorry about that. And then also have a strategy. You have to have. That's the other thing is I also believe in being a little direct and kind of harsh about that, which is like you better have a strategy. You can't just be like, oh, I want to own my own business. Well, that means nothing. Or people say, I want to get in shape. It's like, yeah, great. What's your strategy? So I think coupled with that is a high degree of sort of like realistic accountability. And certainly, that's what I learned from being in sports, which is you can say whatever you want, but once you get on that court, all the truth comes up. So if your preparation was real, if you worked hard enough, if you were lucky enough, if your team was whatever, cool. But if you go like, I want to be really good, and you don't do the practice, when you get on the court, you're going to get your ass. So it's like, with that, like, oh, I'm unsure is, okay, what's the plan? We have to have a plan here.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about pursuit and strategy some more with you a little bit later. Before we do, I want to talk about Hawaii quickly.
Okay. As the Englishman.
Yeah, I know. More specifically, Kauai. So I was very fortunate to be taken there twice, actually, by my parents. Yeah, but it's like, and I still go there in my mind probably every day when I meditate. And Hanalei Bay is just that kind of sanctuary for me, and I just imagine it and I see the waves, and that's like, I'd just be interested to hear like your thoughts and feelings about the energy and everything that you get from Hawaii.
It's interesting. So all the islands are very different. I lived on Maui with Laird for maybe 13 or 14 years. I have been on Kauai with him for about a year and a half. And then we have now been back there for about 13 years. And that's where he grew up. He grew up towards the end of the road. It's a place called Wainiha Valley. And it's a very powerful, the whole island is very powerful. But it's interesting. So Maui's really windy and things kind of whip through, and Oahu, the gathering island, where there's Waikiki and Honolulu and all the famous surf spots, that has a kind of a city element to it. And then the Big Island is the Big Island. There's way less people, space. It's not old. It's a lot of rock. So Kauai is the oldest island. So it's very green. It's already eroding back down, right? It's gone to full expansion, and now it's eroding down. And when I first lived there in the mid 90s, and I grew up on an island, I grew up in the Caribbean. So it wasn't like I was unfamiliar with island living. I had a really hard time because it's a very heavy place. And when you talk about the energy, there's a stillness there that you cannot escape yourself. And that was hard on myself. That was also very hard on my relationship with my husband. And I wasn't ready to live there. And we ended up going back to Maui, where maybe there's more distraction. And Kauai is like, here I am, and there I am, and oh, here I am. And so there's something really truthful about that place and powerful that I really appreciate. And the nature is overwhelming. I mean, you go there and it's giant waves, and the Pali Coast, there's mountains coming through, 3,500 feet straight out of the ocean. There's deep valleys that you can feel. People used to live in the valleys. There's a sacredness to the place. I say often that God has offices all around the world, and he definitely keeps one in Hanalei Bay. And I really appreciate being able to live there. This second time around, this last 13 or 14 years has been really a wonderful experience for me. But I always say I'm a welcome visitor there. I'm a welcome visitor on the planet, but certainly when I'm in Hawaii and Kauai, even though I have a community there and what have you, I'm a visitor, and I conduct myself as such. And it's an extraordinary place.
What's your favorite thing about it?
just think how dramatic it is. And it's not going to accommodate you. There's no accommodating in Kauai. So you can say like, well, I'm here at this place and I paid all this money to stay here, and it still will rain on you for 10 days straight. It's like, it's not easy there. Like certain places you go and it's like, oh, the fancy restaurant and then all these things. Kauai, you sort of have to want to be there, and you also have to adapt to her, where it's like you're here to witness the nature and be a part of it. Whether it's going to the sea or going to the mountain, but it's not going to bend and flex around you. And I think, again, going back to honesty, there's something just so honest about that. And obviously witnessing how beautiful it is. Where I live, I look at a valley, I look at Honolulu River, I look at the mountain range, and I look at Honolulu Bay. So when I go there, it's like, I joke, like in my house, I don't have really art because everything's oriented to the outside, because it's like, let's get as close to that as we can. It's extraordinary, but it's not for everybody.
No, I mean, thanks for that, Gabby. It's really reminding me of the times you talk about the rain. There was a moment in the hotel that we stayed in, which wasn't far from Honolulu Bay, and someone came to teach a surf lesson, and it was pouring down with rain. And like a surf lesson in a swimming pool was like, what can you really do? But they were just helping people get on the board and basically selling lessons for down at the beach.
Yeah.
And not many people turned up, or there was a few people dotting about, and some people got involved, but it was pouring with rain. And me and my brother, because we were English, we didn't really care. We were just out there playing anyway. And at the end, we helped the guy put the surfboards in the back of his van.
Yep.
And he was just like, but basically it showed me that there was a code, and I really liked the code. And because we did that, he was like, listen, come to the beach and I'll give you a free lesson. I had no idea who this guy was, but it turned out to be Titus Kinamaka, the big wave surfer, just like an amazing human being. And we spent 2 days on the water with him. And it was just like, it was things that will live with me forever, just from like a simple act of just helping him put surfboards in his van. Well,
first of all, that's a very fortunate experience for you to, come across Titus on a good day, humility is coveted in Hawaii. I think in general, the Polynesian culture is fascinating this way, where they are warriors for real. It isn't like, hey, I'm going to punch you out. It's like, they will. It's just the way it is. But behind that it's all about humility. And so if you're willing to be of service to someone else, the notion of the aloha spirit, which is to give you whatever I have, it is alive and well. And but I think the only way to receive it is to be humble enough to receive that. And that's the thing, right? Is none of us are above anything. And so Hawaii is a great reminder of that. The Polynesian culture is a really beautiful example of that. I find in general the Polynesians don't take themselves so seriously, but they have pride, and there's difference. Like, they're not taking themselves serious, but they do have pride, and there's a lot of love and power. Like, it's an interesting mix of like that power that the culture has, and then just sort of the real fun and playfulness that they have. And so a lot of times, and I find like American culture is a little more entitled. We're a little more bratty and younger, and kind of like, we're here and like, you should speak English, and wherever we go, kind of thing. And I understand, because it's connected to a lot of cool qualities, like what's over there, and we try something new. And my dad's a shopkeeper, and I think I can be a president. Like, there's great things in that, in that spirit, but there's definitely something to be learned for, hey, I'm here, I'm a visitor, thank you so much, can I be of service? And I think when you take that anywhere in the world, it works out.
Yeah, I love that. It was really nice actually listening to, because you went on the Joe Rogan show and you talked at length about Hawaii and the different islands, and like some of the ones I never heard of before, which you're literally not allowed on.
It's so cool.
Awesome.
Like, there are Hawaiians there, and you just can't arrive there. Yeah.
But you know what? When we talk about energies, like you get it from a place, but you get it from a person as well. I certainly feel an energy from where you're speaking, and as you were speaking then, I was thinking, you've been on the Tim Ferriss show, you've been on Joe Rogan, you've been around so many strong, powerful males, you're married to one. Like, how do you hold yourself in that company?
Well, listen, I won't BS. I think there is a notion of one spirit is the indication of strength, right? It isn't a physical package. I think one's real sense of self. But I also feel that coming from growing up on an island and being in sports, I am 6'3", 190. I think there was something about I had choices to make when I was very young. Was I going to take ownership of my space? Which didn't mean I was going to infringe on others. And that also meant that there was room in my space for other people, but was I going to take ownership of that space? And I think when I was young, I even doing athletics, I really wanted to just stay out of the way. That doesn't work. You have to take up space. You have a job to do, right? Like, you have to cover a certain area. You have to tell your teammates, like, no, I protect this space. So there was a real lesson in that for me as a large woman, because a lot of times large women want to be smaller. And also in general, women are sort of taught, well, be nice. Well, you can be nice and strong at the same time. You can create boundaries and be a compassionate person. These are not mutually exclusive, but learning that language, it just takes a minute. And it takes, you have to get pushed up against a few 100 times to be like, oh no, you can push up against me, but I'll let you know when you've gone too far. And so I also have found that every real true alpha that I know, male or female, just alpha spirit, actually comes from love. They don't come from, let me show you how tough I am, or I'm going to be first. The real alphas I know, the real ones, are all the most sort of gracious and loving and of service people. And they're not exerting their will on everybody. And so if you pay attention, there's a lot to learn from people around us, wherever we are, right? And that just felt that landed always the best to me. The males or females that were in charge, but really wanted to see you succeed, or would help you, or give you information to help you, progress. That really reeked of feeling secure. It's when someone's like super tough and always has to win, or they're not going to help you. When you start to pay attention, you realize they're afraid. And so I think the power of kind of knowing how to inhabit your space, but also be willing to help those around you. It's a much easier way to go through life. And when you don't have to be right, and when you don't have to always, teach everyone a lesson. It's not your lesson to teach. The world, life, nature, God, like, they'll figure it out.
That's amazing.
It's the way it is.
Yeah, I love that about not being afraid to take up space as well, like in a physical or like a metaphorical way. Like own that for yourself. And talking about alphas, I know you just had Tony Robbins on your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's an intense guy.
Yeah.
And he has a really different approach. It's like he's going to just ram through everything. But what's interesting is it still within his approach is a lot of love for people, enjoyment of other people's successes. So it's just a different version. I am not as, I don't, he's very confident. But see, what's interesting is there's a lot of people I talk to after interviewing Tony where they really respond to that. Like, I'm going to tell you how to do it. This is the 5 ways, like, get the fuck up and like get in your face. And there's so many people that activates. So what you realize is sometimes what other people need to hear may not be our language, but will work for a lot of other people. And my husband and I talk about this a lot, about like, hey, don't kill the messenger. What is this person trying to do? keep focusing on that. And because, like, for example, Jillian Michaels, she's an American trainer. She was on a show called The Biggest Loser, right? And Jillian Michaels is a very compact woman, small, and she was never a professional athlete, right? And she's on this show where people are like 600 pounds and 800 pounds. And I used to watch it and be like, oh my gosh, because she's yelling and just, doing all this stuff. And I heard her in an interview say once, listen, these people are almost dead. And it was the way she could get through, right? And I thought, oh, you know what? That's right. I don't understand. And because I don't respond to that doesn't mean that there is not an important place for that type of delivery for a lot of people. So I think in those cases, it's also understanding we're not all going to be someone's cup of tea. However, if someone's out there trying to help people find their whys and to be their best, and they do it with a language that you're just like, whoa, what we don't realize is there's a whole big group that's like, oh, I heard that. Okay.
I'm a coach, Gabby, and a lot of the stuff that I do is to help people first understand their wiring, neural wiring, narratives, and then help them to channel the ones that are working and get rid of the ones that aren't. But so much of that is around our threat response, like we get threatened by different things. So if we are wired or habitually responding to our threat, then we're also going to respond when Tony Robbins shouts in our face, because it's the threat response kicking in again, but for a positive action. So I
respond to, well, I don't really, it's unnecessary, like for me, but it's been a really valuable lesson to like, hey, you know what? Everybody is really different. And so there's a really important place for that.
There's a show over here in the UK called SAS Who Dares Wins. They're the Special Forces guys. I don't know if you're familiar with the series.
No, I've seen a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm friends with some of they're called the DS, the directing staff, who like run and lead the show. And I've spoken with and I'm friends with a lot of the people who are the recruits as well. And some of them loved it and some of them hated it. And I think the ones who have done quite a lot of work on themselves already and have some awareness and have sort of gone there, hated it, because I don't like getting shouted at, because then it's kind of, they've gone through that bit, if that makes sense.
I do, and I'll go one step beyond that. Like, so I have a woman, and I've talked about her frequently, Byron Katie, and she has a program called The Work. 4 questions, like when something's happening, 4 questions. She had a real crisis until her mid 40s, and she was depressed and out of, kind of yelling and just sort of all over the place. She checked herself into basically like a halfway house, because that was the only thing her insurance would cover. She lived in a place called Barstow, California, which like humans aren't probably supposed to live there. It's supposed, should be cactus and like a couple scorpions. And when she was there, they were like, you're going to have to sleep upstairs. You're freaking out the other people here. And when she woke up, she had like this whole lift of suffering just lifted away. And she literally went home and everyone's like, what's happened? Like they even thought maybe she had a drop in, like an angel, something. Like people are like, what the hell happened to Katie? And she said she had these 4 questions. Is it true? Can I know it to be true? For sure. Who am I when I think those thoughts? And who would I be without that belief? Right. And so when people have these narratives, it's self-inquiry. And so what's interesting is now my hope would be that I could even go beyond that. I graduated certain levels of quote work or self-inquiry. And when someone's shouting at me, let's say, that I would even then within that moment have the wherewithal to be like, oh, well, what are they trying to do here? And not even respond any longer than to who is delivering, but what is trying to be delivered. And so I feel like if we could actually even move beyond even that and try to keep seeing the essence of things and respond and not be like emotional, like, well, I mean, it's a good message, but I don't like the way they said it to me. Could I even get past that?
Yeah, that's amazing. And so much as well, so often, I've seen this a few times. I'm not going to say who because it's unfair, but like when you see somebody and they say something and really that's the advice they want to give them to themselves. That's like the mirror, or, when the shadow arises, it's like you're saying that. And because I know them, I can see that really that's what you just need to tell yourself in this situation. Whereas in the past, I'd have reacted and been like, fucking hate this person.
The thing is, how do we get through things where we don't ever need to go into that fear response where it's even like, well, it would have been good, but they were yelling at me. It's like, really? So, and that's the thing, like when I look at Katie, she doesn't respond to anything. She's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, people have yelled, they yell at her, they're frustrated by her. And she's like, oh, okay, I can take a look at that. Even she talks about her grown children, and like, there is no more intimate dynamic than you're a parent and your kids are telling you stuff, right? Because you're not objective. You don't want to be criticized because the job is so important to you. And I even see with her, I mean, she's 70, whatever, 8 or 9 now. And she's like, oh, we talk about it. I said, do you think your kids would be different if you raised them as you are, who you are today, versus she was in her 40s. So her youngest kid was 16. And she goes, oh, my 3 kids have 3 different mothers. And I just really enjoy getting to know her. Because also what she's saying is their feeling about who she is. Each of them have a different point of view. And so rather than being defensive, she's like, it's so exciting to get to know her, all 3 of her. And so my hope, or one of my goals, is to keep looking at new situations with curiosity and not with all my preconceived ideas, because I have a lot of them. My brain is a total meaning maker more than other people. I am very much into, where does this fit? How is this defined? Where does this live? How do I make this safe, organized? Got it. And now what I'm trying to do is like really take my foot off the gas of the meaning maker and just be like, what's happening here and now? And also to your point, if I'm reacting, it's because it's something with me. Why am I reacting to this? Why does this strike me? And I'm having such a, intense response to this. Can I take a look at that? So I'm really trying to practice that more. It's hard to do, but it certainly gets easier if you put it in play more often.
I'm really pleased you mentioned parenthood as well. I've got an 18-month-old daughter.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Smiling.
Yeah. Yeah. I've mentioned the holiday. We just had an amazing time. Like, first time for her on the beach, first time like really enjoying swimming because it was warm. But I had a really nice time this morning walking my dog, listening to your episode with your daughter. That was from like last year or 2020 or something, but it was amazing. So thank you for doing that. It kind of really opened my mind and made me think more about, it's going to be really hard to have a teenage daughter or, an adult.
We had some very big challenges with her, meaning not her. She went through some things that we were not prepared to deal with. And, you think I can do all these things that I think are the quote right things, and stuff is still going to happen, and you're going to feel upside down, and you're not going to know what's the right place to get help. And what I would say to any person is that's okay, and just keep asking questions and keep trying to get resources. And if they don't feel good, trust that. Because you may not have the answers and you might be in very new terrain, but you still have your instincts. And so I would say also parents will spend time going like, how could this happen? And why couldn't we avoid this? Or whatever the thing is. And that's not the point. The point is wherever you are at the moment. Let's say you have a kid who's like, I'm depressed, or I've been engaged in, drug and alcohol use, or if it's, someone sexually hurt me when I was younger, whatever the thing that gets thrown at us, like, okay, I'm anxious, whatever it is instead of being defensive about that, because it's painful, these, types of things, is to just figure out, how do I support this person, and not spend a lot of time trying to figure out how you could have been better. Because that's what happens, right? We want to justify to them, well, I love you and I've been here and how could this happen? That's so not the point. The point is to be like, I love you and I'm going to help figure out with you how we can make this better. And it's really uncomfortable. And yet you can get through it so much faster if you just say like, great, we got stuff to learn. And if I've blown it, I'm going to apologize and I'll deal with that. And because I don't know that there's a way to get out unscathed.
Yeah, it's a different type of threat response, isn't it? It's like, I'm doing a bad job, I'm a bad parent, if that comes up, and then it's your energy and your shit you're bringing to that. But I mean, the conversation was amazing, and she was so articulate. So I really recommend people go listen to that.
She's definitely one of my teachers. Like when they talk about like food is like children you raise teacher, and you have a little kid and you think, oh my God, what is this kid going to teach me except some patience? It's like, but you love them so much that it really, you'll say, oh, I'll take a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say to parents is what's really cool about older children is I actually believe, because then we're older, is they're one of our next opportunities of real growth going into this sort of next chapter of our lives, that we can look at life differently instead of same all the time, is because they're so important to us, and it's a real opportunity, as uncomfortable as it is to continue to grow and change, even though we're 40s and 50s and 60s and such. And so take it because it's actually very good for us.
Yeah, I keep thinking for people who don't have kids, like, because when you have a kid, it is such a good opportunity for that. And I know I said she's only 18 months, but God, she's forced me to do so much for myself, which is very specific to my childhood and stuff. But it forced me to look at that stuff, which I wasn't prepared to do before.
Yeah. And if you're successful, like you help other people, right? And so what's interesting is you're actually more in danger of missing those opportunities than somebody who's kind of like all zany and all over the place. And so that's the other thing, is it's a real opportunity to kind of open us up.
Yeah. I agree so much. It's weird. I feel like a different person, actually. I feel like a different person, and not just from a label of saying like a father. Now I feel different. Like even when I get almost flashbacks, or like I feel the version of that I used to be, it's like, no, I don't want to be that anymore, because I was so restricted by my own baggage and things I hadn't looked at. So yeah, what was your childhood like? I know you said that earlier you mentioned that you weren't like super parented, you said, and I was sad to read that you lost your father when you were quite young.
Yeah, so my parents, they met in probably like 1969, 68. Everything was kind of yeehaw. My mom was from New York. My father's from Trinidad, and they met in California. So by nature, that probably was an indication that they both were a little bit rebellious in a certain way. And I don't know that they had a long courtship. And then my mother was pregnant with myself. By the time I was 2, they were not together any longer. My mom weirdly was training dolphins in a circus in Mexico City. And so when I was 2, I was in Mexico City with her, and she was quite young. And my father was in school getting his doctorates, and I got whooping cough. So my mom grew up in Long Island, New York, and she thought it was best. I lived with a couple that were her kind of neighborhood friends. They dated in high school, and then he went to Vietnam, and they were still together. And they took me in until I was about 7. And really different, high school education. He worked as a sanitation worker. She's 5 feet tall, like completely a different kind of environment. But they treated me like their kid. I was walked to a bus stop. I had my hair put in ponytails, and they really loved me like their own child. And then when my mom met my stepfather, who was from Puerto Rico, she sort of was ready to parent. And so she sort of requested my presence. And you can imagine that extraction was not pretty. And like I had said, during that time, my father died in a plane crash. So I think I've come to a place certainly of understanding that my mom probably really genuinely did the best she could, but she was not particularly on it. And so I was always kind of scanning the horizon as a kid for, I had always 3 plans in place on how to make sure I was going to be okay. And then my junior year, she moved me to Florida from the Virgin Islands, because sometimes when you grow up on an island, unfortunately, it's like really good when you're little, and it can be sort of nowhere when you get a little older. And there's not a ton to do. I dibbled and dabbled a little bit in volleyball at that time because I was so tall. But it's when I moved to Florida that I got really involved in sports, and I ended up getting a scholarship and going from there. So I think I felt like I had always very good adults, though, like kind of peripheral characters in my world. So even though I didn't have the person, and that's the thing that if you can rethink about it as any person, is you think, oh, your mom and dad are supposed to, they should. But just because they don't or they're not able to, doesn't mean there's not a lot of people around you that are sort of stepping in and stepping up for you. And I always had that. I had the couple, my aunt and Uncle Joe, who raised me, who takes a precocious kid in from 2 to 7. One of my daughters is more like me. And I thought, this is a kid only a mother could love, because I was obnoxious, like pushing and questions and very, kind of strong willed. And I really had a greater appreciation for them. After especially my youngest was born, because we're very similar, and I'm like, whoa. And then I had coaches and other adults. My principal, my senior year, I lived with him and his family for a minute while my mom was deciding if she was going to stay in Florida. But he said, send me so that I could, be in school and play sports. And then my college coach. So I just always, I always encourage people. I've said this many times. You have low cards and you have high cards. Play the high cards, because if we just focus on, but look at all these 2s and 3s I have, it's like, yeah, but if you keep scanning, there's some aces in there and some kings, and like focus on the high cards. And that can come in the place of a gift, of a physical trait, of other people, a combination, a talent. And because we all have low and high cards, and that's the thing. And we could spend our whole lives talking about the low cards. It's like, okay, I've got it. And so, yeah, so I think that really actually equipped me with some skill sets of that have really helped me in my life as an adult.
Yeah, it makes sense completely why you became a meaning maker from that. I'm the same, by the way, big meaning maker. It's all got to make sense and add up. So, and even with your daughter, listen to that episode now, that kind of makes sense, because then the added pressure for you to be the perfect mum, perhaps.
Yeah, because I see that my mom suffers because we weren't able to remedy our languages are just so different. And so it's interesting. So what bonds us sometimes is time. Well, she didn't do that at the important time. So the next thing was going to be that somehow we could connect as people. And we're so different that it never really got there. And so I thought, I don't want to look down the barrel of not having a connection or the opportunity to connect with my children. It's always felt really important.
Yeah, amazing. I have the same feelings. So do you think that, because that sounds, as you're explaining there was a lot of, I don't know if I say insecurity, but it was kind of going from different households at times, that then sport was you said playing your high card, but it was also your familiarity and the certainty, like you knew the rules within the games, you knew the team structure and everything.
Yeah. And it's discipline. Discipline always felt really good to me. Earning it felt valuable. It felt like a currency I understood, like sweat equity, if you will. And then being part of something. Not all of my teammates loved me, and I didn't love all of them, but somehow that was sort of like a family, and you were part of something. And then it was also a place like I could be tall. It sort of had a lot of different elements, and having coaches that really looked out for me as a person and taught me valuable lessons. There was a lot to that for sure.
Yeah. And then you had an incredible career as an athlete, and you got your scholarship at Florida State, which is like one of the biggest universities, and still have records that stand today, got in their Hall of Fame. I actually went to play soccer and I got a scholarship to play. It's a small like D2 college, but they gave me a full ride. So I lived in Ohio for a couple of years and did my master's. So I understand the kind of the NCAA life, and that it's just so amazing, isn't it? And then you went on to play pro.
Mm-hmm.
But when did you realize that you were really good? And then what did playing volleyball at such a high level give you?
I never felt like I was very good, quite frankly. I had imposter syndrome quite a lot because I was so late to kind of really doing it, that a lot of times I always felt like I was just fudging it, like taking information in and doing physical motion. And also, I've said this often, when you're not groomed to be successful, it's very confusing when you all of a sudden become like you have opportunity, or you're winning, or you're being successful. It always feels like it's someone else's situation happening. So that was something that I wish I had experienced differently, because I always had to work harder than everybody to justify to myself any opportunities that I was getting. And in some ways it was less fun, more pressure. And I wish I had grinded it out just with a different attitude, instead of I was, so serious, and because I felt like I didn't deserve it, so I better really work hard. And we don't deserve anything. I should have just received the gift and said, okay, I'm going to do my best. And that was a lesson I learned probably later.
Yeah. Yeah, but you like from outside in, that's really inspiring to hear. Like, it's always nice when you hear the most successful people, the people you look up to and admire, who have imposter syndrome too, like we all do. Because you went and then had a successful modeling career, and then everything you've done with XPT and the food company as well now. It's like, do you still have those feelings that you don't deserve it, or have you moved past that?
I've changed it, and I always say, we all receive grace, because there's people who are more talented than me that would be willing to work harder than me, and they just are not in the situation. And so it would never be the audacity to think, oh, something I've done. So it's not that I don't have imposter syndrome. I still don't think it's something I've done. It's that I'm receiving grace, and that I will then show my appreciation for it by taking care of the opportunity, by working hard, by trying to put something out there that's more, is positive oriented, and to pay attention to the lessons. Because if you spend all this time inside going, oh, why is this happening? It's like you're missing the education that you're going to need actually to continue on in your businesses, in your relationships, and everything. So I'm just trying to be a good steward and a good student. And what happens is you prolong then the time that you get to be in the grace of like the professional grace. People go, oh, you, how do you keep changing and doing all these different things? I'm not. This is an extension of the original opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Which of, because like there's so many things we mentioned there. In fact, actually, it'd be really nice to know like what a typical, or as close to typical week look like for you, because I know you've got so many things on. So how does your week play out?
My youngest daughter is 14, so my family is sort of the anchor to the schedule. Like there's certain things that are happening based on the family. Okay, that's a given. My self-care, and maybe I actually put that in front. So my training, my eating, and it's not like crazy amounts of hours. It's just consistent and getting that done. So every week, that's built in. Self-care and family is built in. And when people have small children, I will say be patient, because it's harder, the self-care part. It gets easier. They become more independent. So I'm also saying that with like, it's had different tones over the years, and different times. Like, so if the workload is heavier, if Laird Superfood or XBT is being more demanding, or my podcast, then the self-care might get shortened, but it never is compromised all the way. Like that's the number one. And I have my relationship with my husband, that has to be, if it's going to thrive and keep growing. I mean, it's been 26 years. I have to put the energy into it. And what's great about being with someone like him is he is a squeaky wheel for sure. He is not here to compromise a real relationship. Like he would never tolerate, oh, we have kids and we're phoning it in now. It's like, no, this is a moving and dynamic thing between us. So these are conversations, this is intimacy, this is kindness. And like every couple, it gets stretched at different times, but this is an important part of what makes everything have real meaning in my life. So I don't put the things like work so far in front of everything else that really is the thing that I know is sort of the richness, is the real meat of my real life. My real life is my relationships, and it's my relationship with myself. So I take care of those. And then from there, it's meetings, it's interviews, I have a lot of homework to do, as you know, for the podcast. It's driving a kid here and there. It's all part of it. And what I do is I still write things down. And so I have my month in a snapshot right in front of me. So let's say the work is looking very thick for a week or two. I will make sure that I figure out how to stagger that. And I will say that this is a luxury. Like I've been on planes 6 days a week. I did that like in my 20s and such. So now I'm at a place where I go, okay, how do I want to try to structure that? And a lot of it is making sure that there's some sequence of like work, life, work, life, work, life, work, life, not just work. And listen, there might be weeks where it's like, hey, this is just the way it's happening. So when you interact with your family, and make sure to be extra present and things like that. And if I don't have time to train, then my eating gets tightened up even more and cleaner. So I'm not punishing myself with not moving and then eating like crap. So it's really always calibrating these things.
It sounds quite similar to how you don't necessarily live by that. Here's 5 tips for achieving positive mindset, or here's 6 ways to, that kind of structured thing. Again, it's just that more open, more kind of a wider periphery to life, just letting things, but still being structured, but letting things come as they do.
Well, and what I say is that I look at everything. Let's say I have a big day or week, and I look at everything in a horizontal perspective, like a calendar. So I have a sense of it, and then I flip it. And I just let one thing come at me at a time, because I can't worry about dinner at 10 in the morning when I have, if I'm going to tape 2 podcasts or have a meeting or a board meeting or whatever, or an ingredients meeting, for Laird Superfood, and sit there and, talk about ingredients for real. Yeah. So it's having a sense of things, and then doing the thing that you're doing at that moment, because we can feel, I am notorious, because I am a good planner, for responding internally in a stressful way to stuff that's either happening later in the day or the next day or in 2 days that I'm not even there yet. And so what I'm really trying to learn is like, it's not worth it. Like, it's all going to get done. Why am I carrying this extra tension? Because I'm sort of trying to control and will these things. I'm not there yet. And so that has been a real exercise for me, because I am pretty aware and pretty organized, and that has its place, and then it has its place against you. An example will be for people, let's say you have a week and you go, oh my God, these 3 nights, this is happening, and then these people are coming over. Inevitably, one of those things is someone's canceling. Right? Like, it's just going to happen. So why would I spend energy responding to something that's going to happen in 2 days, that in a day someone's going to cancel, or it went from 8 people to 4 people, or whatever. It's like, I'll worry about it when it's time to worry about it. And that's been very helpful. But what I am dogmatic about, for sure, is taking care of myself. It is the only time I would say that I am ferocious as a mother and as a wife which is like, all of you are not going to eat me alive, and my schedule and my self-care schedule. I love you. I will serve you. I will do everything for you. You will not infringe in that space to a point where it diminishes, because I'm responsible for that. And so I always encourage people, but especially women, because that will go out the door quickly, to be pretty brutal about that.
What's the priority in your self-care routine? What's the sort of thing that you're spending the most time to look after yourself?
Well, my movement routines will also, they bleed into, I sleep better and I make better food choices. Somehow when I don't move, all of a sudden then I'm going to eat more crap because I'm medicating through food and stress and whatever. So movement. I personally, we have pool training. I really enjoy lifting weights. I understand how good they make me feel. I understand the importance of them. Sometimes I will do that to a detriment. So it's like really doing all the small homework to make sure, listen, I'm beat up. Like every athlete that's ever done any sport, people think, it's like, oh no, we're the most beat up of anybody. I already have a fake knee. It's like, I have to also do the little things. So I try not to just go towards the wall that's familiar to me, but also do these little things to maintain feeling good. But I notice if I do that, cardio will go way down the line. For me, it's like pool training, sauna, lift weights, cardio. Okay, it finds its place. And then, and that always leads to better habits. Just in general, I go to bed earlier, I eat better, I drink more water. It's like that. So I make it simple. I go like, what do I need to do to trigger this reaction that's positive, the dominoes for everything else?
That's great. I really love that. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have set up a gym in my garage with a sauna and stuff. So I've got a cold dip outside as well. So, but I'm like you. Most of my stuff is just to keep me pain free now. But yeah, no, it's actually makes me train better. It's more like postural and functional training, whereas a lot of it before was ego and trying to just get bigger muscles and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, if there's a season like it's summer and you think, I want to whatever, that's fine too. I mean, things can have their cycle, but if it's just a go-to because you always have, that wouldn't be the best reason. What's the way it's supporting you in all of the things? And, Laird and I talk about this a lot, where it's like, hey, we're just organisms. How do we support the organism to be its best self, whether it's in response to stress, showing up in relationships, being productive in work, feeling good about yourself, moving into your personal life, whatever. It's like, how do you do that?
And for you, that is exercise, which then triggers better sleep, earlier bedtime, better eating habits.
Yeah. And I'm just a better person because I'm mad when I don't get to exercise, because I'm like, it's the one thing I know, and something I do all the time that I think is really important is just having that sense of like, where am I at? How do I feel today? Am I agitated? Is there a relationship that's, a little bumpy that I need to address some things? So I think it's also, and I've learned this a lot from Laird, is I don't let things grow so I don't know the cause of my irritations or anxieties. It's like, okay, why am I feeling? I can find the line quickly because I haven't let everything sort of come down on me. So it's like dealing with things all the time and checking in with yourself. And even if it's like with your partner, like, hey, I haven't gotten enough quality time with you. It feels important to me. Or with your kids, like something's going on with that kid and I don't know what it is. How am I going to, ask them or will they share with me, or how can I sort of figure that out? So I think that's another thing that's been really helpful, because then it's not all falling in on you all the time, but you have a sense of, where things are at and what's impacting you and what needs to get handled and such.
Yeah, I really like that you said the connections and the relationships first as well. I know you said yourself first, right? Which is obviously critical. It's on the plane, you put your mask on first and then everybody else's. But, I saw this thing on Instagram yesterday. It said, make the most of the small things because one day they'll be the big things. And it was a heartbreaking picture of, the scene from Up where he sat with his wife, the Disney film. Yeah. He sat with his wife, and then in the next picture, his wife's not there anymore. And he's like, brutal. But that's it, isn't it? Like the life is those little moments. Like I had tons of them on the holiday that I just had with my little girl. It's like those are what it's all about, really. Forget that email or other thing. In fact, I sat on the plane next to a guy who I could just tell what it was going to be like. And I don't want to generalize. He could have had a bad day. Who knows what's going on in his life? But sat straight on the phone and was like, "Do you have the Wi-Fi code?" It was like, "We don't have Wi-Fi." It was like a budget airline. We don't have Wi-Fi. It's like, "Well, can I pay for Wi-Fi?" Like, it was like fuming that he couldn't send his emails on this flight. And then someone put their bag against his wife's bag, and he stood up and was like, "Don't do that. It's a $2,000 handbag. Like, you don't know what it's just like, wow."
Yeah.
Wow. And you just see the difference in when people get sucked into the wrong things.
Yeah. Well, it's easy. But it's our jobs to constantly unwind things every day so that we can try our best to have some kind of clarity about what really feels important and what we want to work hard towards. Because when people talk about success, I'm like, what is your definition of success? And the only way you're going to know that is if you're in touch with that, instead of the world leading you by your nose and saying like, get more, be first. It's like, okay, good luck. You can be all those things and still do that in a way that is connected to like yourself and your heart and, everything else.
When did that change, or has that always been the way? Because I certainly feel, for me in sport, I felt like success was everything and winning was everything. And then it shifted. And I wonder whether that was linked to your time in Kauai. You said that stillness where you kind of forced in there, or when did that change for you?
I always felt that way.
Okay.
I always, because I think I grew up so scared in a way, even though I didn't really show it. I was always a, kind of stoic kid, which has its own issues. I think I was always really clear about what felt important. And in a way, I probably would have been an even better volleyball player if I had the perspective. I looked at it like this. Here's a huge opportunity. You can't let your teammates down. The objective is to win. That's the end goal. So work really hard to reach the goal. But those were the premises. That was the premise of my formula, not I want to be number one. And that's the most important thing. And win, it was like, okay, we're going to work hard. I have to show up for my teammates. If we do the right things and the objective is that we win, that'll be the indication that we've done the right things in our preparation. So I never bit that hook. And where I grew up, in the islands, it's like, that was never a real big dialogue. Like be one, be first, it was like people were just living. And so I think I had a bit of that already.
Yeah. Could I ask you this might be difficult, but if you could summarize the learning or the takeaway from each of your sort of standout roles. So Gabby, the volleyball player, Gabby, the model, Gabby, the businesswoman, with Laird Superfoods, Gabby, the XPT trainer, podcaster and mother and wife.
Okay. Well, let's see. Well, I'll just start with athlete and that part. I think that the easiest part that I came away with was a lot of it doesn't make sense, right? Like, why would I get to and someone else wouldn't? And maybe, because I was late to the game and things really fell in line for me. So rather than focusing on, well, why didn't so-and-so get to do it? I would believe as an athlete is take care of the task at hand and pay attention. So if it's not working, what course correct quickly. And the other thing I understood about it as an athlete was it really gives you the capacity to work harder than you probably really want to. And there's real value in that. And not running away from that, but moving into that, having a relationship with that discomfort and not resisting it, but being like, oh, okay, here's another opportunity. I'm married to somebody who has a really good relationship with discomfort naturally. And it was very interesting for me to witness that and to be like, oh, because we like to label things like, oh, that was hard, or it's like, no, it just was a different environment. that was for learning. I think as a wife, what I have learned is I am here. I show up in service to Laird. I'm here to try to make his life better. But it is totally on me to make myself feel good and feel happy. It's not his job. The sort of the good thing about the relationship I have with Laird is, we're not each other's parents. We're each other's partners. And I think, there's something really valuable about knowing how to be loving and say, hey, I'll do anything for you, and simultaneously having very clear boundaries. And it doesn't mean you're throwing down the boundaries all the time. I don't. And plus I don't need to. My husband is self-regulated. He's taking care of himself. But the point is like, there's a way I can say it. So for example, he is a restless person. He wants to be in nature. He wants to ride big waves. If the waves aren't around month after month, he's irritated. And it can be like, oh, believe me, it's a lot. But it's also connected to some really incredible attributes. So one I would say as a partner is try to always connect the attributes. Like if you have somebody that's like super fired up and they talk loud and they want to go, it's also the person who's like not sitting on the couch, but like living life and doing stuff. Right. So, because we always want only the good stuff and not the other stuff that sometimes we're like, whoa. So I would just remind people to quickly draw those lines quickly when it's happening. Be like, yeah, but my guy does this because of that same trait. It's awesome. Perfect. Whatever. Is also, you can put a hand on someone and go, hey, like I'm on your side, and walk away. Like people think setting boundaries is like really getting in their grill and being like, let me tell you. It's like, it isn't. Because if they're aware, you don't need to. You can just be like on your side and then split, right? So the other thing I've learned is like how to communicate with the idea of not inflaming the situation, but setting my boundaries. And that is very, very helpful. But if you think someone else is going to satisfy you and make you feel fulfilled and all these things, whether it's your partner or your children, you're out of your mind. Those books that they read to girls about the white horse and all that, it's totally unfair. And to show up, to be loving and supportive. And if they're having an upside, sometimes your partner will be more successful than you in the outside world. Support that, because sometimes we feel like it's taking them away from us, and that makes us feel threatened and scared. And so we act out on that instead of, you know what, awesome. Because you're going to have those ebbs and flows. One of you is going to be killing it in the world, and the other one is going to be doing something. And it's just the way it goes. And so was a very helpful thing too, because we both have very different times in our careers. And so support them and find out what you want to do, especially girls, right? Like we have kids and then all of a sudden we're sort of in these roles, and it's like, no, keep asking yourself, who are you as an individual person, and what do you want to do? So be of service, have boundaries. And guess what? If you get in a few years and your partner's not on the same page, then you have to reevaluate. But you will never parent them into the way you want them to be. It's never going to work that way. That's on them to come the way that they want to come and show up the way they want to show up. Because the minute we start doing this to each other, I think it's no longer a romantic partnership. It's another thing. With coaching, I've learned to say less, clear and concise, especially like in pool training or what have you, and especially in dealing with men. As a female, and no alpha, female or male, wants to be told what to do. They don't. So how do you make one suggestion clearly and drop it off? And I used my male coaches and my coach from college, who was a female who had a masculine delivery system. So for example, she would say like, hey, that's not good enough. And it wasn't, it's not good enough. It was, hey, it's not good enough. And there's something to be said for being able to switch gears and attaching nothing to it, but also looking at a person like, all I want is what's best for you, your success. is what's important to me, not me exerting my will over you. That is not coaching. Coaching is keeping order so that we can have success and each person can thrive. It is not about exerting your will on somebody. That is actually not a leader, I don't think. So what I've learned is for people to be very clear that they understand by looking in my face, I am just here to help you be successful. And now I'm going to tell you, do it again. Right? Or whatever. And so as a female, that took a minute. How do you not? And then they go like this and like that, and you don't get stuck in the discussion, right? Like pool training, for example, people will be like, well, and then the water and the air, and you just go, great. And you have it. Or you also going to say, you know what? Let's take a second. So for me, coaching was less is more. You should, they always talk about if you should be able to explain everything at a second grade level. If you really understand it, keep it really simple, say less, say way less, and create environments for people to be successful. It's about elevating them. If you're really being a leader, you're just creating an environment to elevate people and for them to be successful, not for you to show how smart you are or how good you are at it or that you're in charge or you're the boss. You are. You don't need to do that. And that was very, 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 very helpful. The other thing I've learned in business is, especially again as a female, the business is ask questions when you don't know, even if you think you're supposed to, because how would you? I didn't go to Wharton School of Business. So the only way I can know is to ask, and don't be embarrassed to ask or seek somebody to mentor you, no matter how successful you are. Go ask questions, and and also be willing to drop off uncomfortable information. I think sometimes it's very hard to say, hey, this isn't working, or we've talked about this 3 or 4 times. I don't think this situation is going to work. This may not be for you. People get mad. They may not even like it. You might lose a popularity contest, and that's okay. Like it doesn't make you a bad person to have to say tough things. And I feel like men navigate this easier than women. They don't tie their value or their goodness up with having to be tough. I think for females in business, a lot of times it's like either we overcompensate and we're like always dropping the hammer, or we're like, is that okay? They'll even start emails with like an apology if they got stuck. Sorry for the delayed response, or they finish the email with like, I hope that's okay. No, this is information. This is work. This is not personal. And really, really learning the orientation in that. Doesn't mean don't bring heart and don't bring love into work, because you can. But in the end, it's like, hey, we're not in the kitchen at our house. Like we're at work. So we have to be at work. And that was very helpful for me. Those types of things. And as a parent, finally, I would say, and I learned this from Katie, excuse me, and I've said this quite a bit. First of all, your children have their own destiny. And that's really scary, because when they're born, everything is possible. They could be a doctor and, a spiritual leader and an Olympic athlete and a scientist and a CEO, and they can be it all, right? And then what you start to realize is like, oh, wow, they have like other traits and they're sort of like this kind of person. And that's so different than myself or their father or whatever. It's like, they have their own journey. And as a parent, that's uncomfortable until you release that, your expectation, right? So that would be one. And expose them to everything. Be a good model. They're not listening to you. They're really watching you, your every move. And that means a model all the way around. How you talk to people at the grocery store, how you talk to your partner, how you take care of yourself. Be a good model. And the last 2 things that I learned that were really important that I did learn from Katie was, if you really want to do stuff for your kids, listen to them. Don't fix all their problems, because we have the answers, right? We know, we're older, we're more experienced. just like listen. And they could be like, my friends did this, or it's a little kid and their bunny's ear fell off and it's not the end of the world. We can stitch the bunny's ear on. No, just like, oh, I'm sorry. Because what you're teaching them is to communicate to you. And as they get older, like with my teenagers, I ask permission to ask questions. Can I ask you a question? Because if they're sharing, you want them to keep sharing. So how do you not inhibit that flow? And sometimes you want to ask a question, or you want to see if they can arrive at a notion themselves. So you want to spark the conversation, but I still say, can I ask a question? Because they will clearly tell you yes or no. But the important thing is that you keep the door open, that they keep coming to you. I mean, I can't tell you how many steering wheels I've gripped in my car when my daughters will be like, and then, no. You're just like, holy, because it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable. And then make yourself happy as a parent. And I don't mean like every day is bliss. Just try to find the way to kind of be showing up in your life more on the kind of like, I feel good about being alive scale, because what Katie says is like, then they know what it looks like. Then they know what it looks like. So ultimately, what do we want for them? And Laird said one time, and this really hit me, we were going through a hard time with our oldest daughter, who's an adult now. She was like 19 in college, something's going on. And I'm thinking about like, oh, friends and jobs and all this stuff, right? And he's like, just survive to 25. And sometimes I think we make it so complicated. And it's like, hey, you know what? If they're here and they're safe and they're good, you can work it out. It'll work it out. We'll work it out. Because if you don't have those things, it doesn't matter. And sometimes you're going to go through some stuff that you think, if everything could just be sort of normal, quote, that would be good enough. So they feel us, the parent. They feel parents. They feel our vibration. Do we believe in them? Are we doubting what's going on? So that's the final and last thing I would say as a parent is when they're going through chunky times, vibrate. They're going to work it out. They're going to figure it out because they feel that. And the notion of that in which you resist persists, right, is so very true. I asked Katie, I go, well, what about like pick up your socks, right? Like pick up your socks. Like how many can you talk about picking up your socks? And she goes, you pick up the socks. You want the socks up. And then it's like, well, you're not teaching them. And you're not, no. And she's like, oh, no, you are. And then you get to enjoy the beauty of the clear floor. And your joy emanates through the house. And guess what? Pretty soon, most likely, they're going to pick up the socks. And it's kind of counter of what the world tells us, right? Because we're like, I'm going to make you and you're going to learn. And part of it is like, if you want to change your environment, change yourself. And it's so scary to do, but it's true in almost every dynamic. If you want to change your environment, change yourself. And it's scary and it's hard and it may not always work out how we want, when we want, and all those things. But I have found that it seems to be the kind of more productive way.
Thanks, Gabby. It's always special when I feel like I can be a listener and not the host for a bit. I just kind of could almost just listen then. It was amazing. That's like outstanding advice and I can't wait to listen back to it again. Yeah, so much there. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I give no advice, right? I'm here to share and I'm here to invite people and I'm only sharing my perspective. Someone might take this and put their own spin on it 100%. Because also every house is different. All the dynamics are different. The people are different. I live in a very strong-willed house and nobody's compliant, really, not really. And we did it a little differently. There was homeschooling. There was other things. So I just want to also remind people that I'm merely sharing, the way it works for us. But I invite them to sort of figure out how it works for them.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that as well. I think for me, I'm a coach, as I said, but I'm a new dad as well, and I run my own business, and I was an athlete. So a lot of what you said, I can really take a lot from that. So selfishly, appreciate it, but I get 100% what you mean. Each listener will take their own thing from that. Last question I have for you, which was something that I read about you a long time ago, and I kind of, for a long time, tried to live by it and forgot it parts along the way, but then try to pick it back up again. So just be really great to hear from you in person about it. But whether we call it a go first philosophy or go first mindset or practice, would really love to hear about that.
Well, and go first sounds bad, right? Like I'm going first. No, it was funny because it was a very spontaneous answer when Tim asked me, "Oh, if you could say to people, try one thing." It was like, just go first. Like, say hello to people first. Let people be the first one to activate service to anyone. Ask people how they're doing. These things that we're all kind of afraid of, right? And what it does is that's how your life is. So wherever you go, you are having these interactions with people. And it's life, it's so many small things where it's these micro connections with people that you may never see again. Hey, how's your day going? Oh no, here, do you want me to take your cart? I'm going back up. These are small little things that they're for you, because ultimately, if you can be reminded that we're all connected and that people are doing acts of kindness, and there's sort of moments, and it just makes life better. But also, it just opens us up, and because we are so guarded and fearful, and like, well, I don't want to look stupid, or what if they don't say something back? Who cares? That practice I think it's really helpful, and I enjoy it. And I'm not going to lie, I use my size to my advantage in that way, because when you have a 6'3" female that's like, hey, good morning, I joke that I bully everybody into saying good morning for sure. But what else is it? What else is it but those small interactions, except those are deep and meaningful relationships with the people that are living on the planet with us. And also it taps us back into our own humanity. When you can see somebody so very different than you, what you perceive is so different, and you realize in that moment that you're exactly the same. You're sharing the sunlight, you're there, you're making it. It's like, oh, you know what? We're not separated. We're all together. And I think it makes you feel hopeful, quite frankly. And finally, the last thing I would encourage people, because you said, you're an athlete and all these things, is also when we can transcend these identities that we have, because we all have them, and we need them, but we do. It's like I'm a 52-year-old woman. I was an athlete. I'm a business person. I'm a wife. All these things. But the other next liberation would be if, like, we don't think of ourselves as anything, and we just kind of are doing the best that we can, and we work in things that we're interested in, and we have these other roles. I think that the ultimate liberation would be in that, because then it becomes about our experience, not about how we're perceived to the outside world. Because that's what kicks our ass. That kicks my ass. It's like, well, how will this be perceived? How will this land? How do I look? It's like, okay. And that's always going to be part of it. It's unavoidable. But what steps can we do to try to lighten that up a little bit?
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much, Gabby. I've really, really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's honestly, it's been a pleasure. I wish we could have done it in person, but this has been great anyway.
On Kauai,
on Hanalei Bay.